Good afternoon. It is actually almost evening now. It's 5:30 p.m. It is Monday, 4/29, 2019. So I'm just gonna get straight into Module 5 discussion, and I'll get right in. We'll get right into it. So first one, recall an issue or incident you faced in a current or previous workplace that involved communication between coworkers and supervisors that either worked well or horribly. So, I remember a time in the Marines when I was a brand new non-commissioned officer. Oh, that thing popped up. Okay, anyways. I was brand new non-commissioned officer, NCO, E4, Corporal of Marines. And a younger Marine had to be taken to the hospital. And of course, I'm the one in charge of this. So while I'm out driving this Marine around, getting him to the hospital because he broke his arm and leg, it's a long story, but it's a good one. So he broke his arm and leg, and I had to take him to the hospital. Then I had to take him to squadron to get it's called a light duty chit. So it means like you can't do anything, you can't be in formation, and it has to get signed off by the commanding officer, and it has to kind of go through a book. And it goes into your like medical record and a bunch of other stuff. So once I got this individual his light duty chit, I took it back. I took the Marine back to the barracks, dropped him off, and then I took that light duty chit to my staff NCOs. So when I got to the squadron, or actually when I got back to my unit, I told my staff NCO, or one of my staff NCOs, like, hey, here's this Marine's light duty chit. He will not be performing his physical fitness test tomorrow. I need you to take this, and I'm going home, because it was like 16:30 at this time, maybe even later. Might have even been like 1700. So the next day I wake up, and I do my normal, get up at like 4:30 and get ready for PT and get on my green and green. And I go outside, and we perform our physical fitness test, and at the end, one of the staff NCOs that was not there the day prior started screaming at me. He's like, why didn't I know that this effing Marine wasn't, at this location? Where is he? Why isn't he here? He's your Marine. Why is he not here? And he's just lighting me up, just yelling and screaming at me. And it's not even my fault. Like, I had given the light duty chit to another staff NCO, and they should have had a horizontal communication between the two. Granted, I could have texted that staff non-commissioned officer, but I shouldn't have to go that far in order to tell that other individual. They should have coordinated a lot better, and I was the one getting just blasted and yelled at for not telling every single staff non-commissioned officer at my unit, when, there's like 7 or 8 of them, and I only need to tell 1 or 2. And I turned in the duty chit for him. So that's kind of my experience with an incident that I faced at a workplace with communication between coworkers and stuff. So describe the incident and then apply at least 3 of the key perspectives. So I think the 3 key perspectives here are: there was no lateral communication between the two. The downward communication I completed flawlessly. I mean, they told me to take him to the hospital. They told me to take him to squadron. I already knew to get the light duty chit. I knew to take that, bring that back. Like, I executed all that flawlessly. And then maybe the upward communication on my part was bad too. I did tell a staff non-commissioned officer that, hey, this Marine's not going to be at PT tomorrow. They should have done a better job of spreading that laterally throughout the other E6s and above, E6s, E7s, and etc. And that should have went back up through. Especially since I actually crossed paths with that staff non-commissioned officer at the squadron, because they were doing weigh-ins the day prior. So they should have known better. Like, come on, you literally saw him in a wheelchair with a, and it was absolutely ridiculous. So next question, or part of that, is what do you believe the authors, scholars mentioned here? What would it say about your experience? So I think that the scholars, the role and the communication should have been presented from the paper form or from one staff non-commissioned officer to the next, but it wasn't there. Like there was no communication, as I mentioned earlier. So I think the scholars would have said something like the lateral communication was just lacking, or there was none of it, if anything. And how might applying information in this chapter have improved the outcomes? Applying my upward communication, or from the text, if I would have probably done a little bit more upward communication, maybe told a couple more, or even texted into that staff non-commissioned officer that was in charge of him, I probably could have received less of a quote-unquote ass chewing. And knowing exactly who to report to probably would have saved me more time as well. So, I mean, that would have been nice. All right, next question. So, apply Mishra's, spelled wrong on the question thing. Apply Mishra's take on grapevines to your own organizational experiences. How do they work? I can't remember a time right now, like, of an organizational experience with grapevines that, that went wrong or went right. I know in the Marine Corps, like a lot of younger Marines find out information faster than even some of the higher ups. I don't know how that works. That's kind of through the grapevine of things, what they say, but I was never one of those Marines, that was first to know. I would always answer with, the usual Lance Corporal don't know, or, something along those lines. So how do they work? So basically they work by one person says something and quite possibly someone hears the back end of the message, or maybe even the front end of the message, and they start assuming things, and then maybe they pass that information out. It can also work by they hear the whole message and then they go ahead and just rack that off through their network of things. So I mean, if it's just PFC to PFC, they just talk to that one PFC, and then that spreads, and it goes by pretty quick. I mean, it's kind of like a telephone game, where one person sitting down talks to the next person, that information gets skewed, next person skewed again, and more and more and more. The information eventually becomes inaccurate instead of one person sitting down 20 people and just telling all 20 people at once. Doesn't always have to be that way, but that's generally sometimes how it is through grapevines. At least from my experience, that's how a lot of grapevines go. What are their purposes? The purpose behind a grapevine is to pass information maybe more fluid, like quicker. I don't think passing information through a grapevine is slow at all. I think that is probably one of the fastest way gossip and rumors get around is through grapevines. It can be true information that gets passed through the grapevine. So that could be a good thing. That's actually one of the beneficials to an organization is using the grapevine method. And outcomes, this information, if even accurate, it can go a long ways, and the process can be extremely fast. But however, research has shown that grapevine communication throughout is 70% accurate, and it's also 70%, or actually 75% accurate, and 70% of it makes up of an organization's communication currently. So that's pretty significant, and that I read that on page like 250 or something. Actually, I have it up here. One sec. I think I read it around 244 actually. So the purpose of a grapevine can be not only to provide formal communication faster, easily bypass individuals without restraint. It can carry useful information if accurate. So if it's not, obviously it's not useful information. So it supplements valid information. So if someone caveats to something, that information can get passed down. And it can satisfy individuals' needs to know, and so forth. So there's quite a bit of the list on there. I think there was 7 different ones from Mishra. Sorry. And outcomes on here, I put the outcomes can be more beneficial than negative for organizations. However, this is a thin line. The biggest problem stems from grapevines is they can be unreliable and get out of hand. That's from page 244. And the last part of that question is, in what way do they impact organizations? And I personally think they impact organizations pretty beneficial. other than the 25% of communication to being false information. So if the false information, if you just have someone just misconstruing information or convoluted, or they're not sure on what they're talking about, then one, you probably shouldn't be listening to them. And two, you just your Grapevine's not really working for your company. So, and the next question. So the last question here is, how does understanding networking within an organization benefit or harm an organization? So based on Brass's Brass's idea of understanding networking within an organization, one can benefit the organization by understanding the frequency and stability of the indirect links. So basically, you have person A, like maybe CEO, tells person B and C, and those two provide information to person D, E, F, and etc. So that could be your indirect link. By understanding the frequency of getting that information from B and C, or even from A in some cases, and the stability of, so the accuracy, adequate, that accuracy, I'm just going to say accuracy in this case, and how adequate that information is of that individual, that can benefit an organization. If you're getting information from B and C on a regular basis, and then, 1 month, all of a sudden, person E decides to tell person F, that this is what they need to do, or this is word that they got from person, A, all of a sudden, then that might be a skew, in this situation. So they probably don't want to take that person's instructions or information and use it to their future goal, or their achieving organization goal. So it could be false information. So how could this harm an organization is the other half that I put on here. Harming an organization can be done through getting different information from multiple sources. So if A gives his source to B and C to provide information to the rest of the people, but the people are going to D now for information, this can be harmful for an organization. That maybe that person D doesn't know, maybe that's a new employee. So they probably don't want to get information from the new employee rather than just going to B and C and just asking, hey, can you repeat the question? They probably feel better about telling them, that objective or what that goal is again, rather than them having to re-explain it because they messed up somewhere and they have to redo everything. So, and that's all I have for this week. I'll see you guys in class. Thank you.